Hi, welcome to Florida Style. I'm JoNell Patterson. Today we're very, very fortunate to have a wonderful musician here, and we're going to find out a lot about Roger Williams, also known as Mr. Piano. Welcome. Nice to have you here in Florida, first of all.
By golly, it's good to be here, even with the heat.
Really? You came right in the middle of a heat wave?
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it, for this time of year? You've really had some hot days.
Now, let's go back to the very beginnings of your career. How long have you been playing piano professionally?
So, Nell, I walked up to the piano when I was 3 years old and I started to play. I've never really been able to crystallize all my religious beliefs, but I sure know I was given a gift because I just kind of automatically knew where the keys were, and I could always play any song that I heard. In fact, my piano teacher would never play a song for me because I could play it back to her. She made me read the music.
Right, and then you'd play it back to her better than she had played it?
Well, no, I don't say that, not at 3 years old, but I did always have a good ear. See, there are two kinds of musicians. There are eye musicians and there are ear musicians. Now, your eye musicians are people like Rubinstein who sit down at the piano, and as they play, they're reading the music in their mind. They actually turn the pages as they play. Those are the eye musicians. The ear musicians, we hear the music. And when we hear it, when we sit at the piano, we're listening to it play just ahead of what we're doing. And so I was always primarily an ear musician. Most of your jazz musicians, most of your great composers are all ear musicians.
Right. Now, you've been very, very famous over the years for playing songs in the more popular vein. Why do you think you went into that style of music rather than the more heavily classical or any other genre of music?
I think the biggest thing that all of us have to discover in life is what we do best. Sometimes even we don't discover it. When I was found or discovered by David Kapp, who was a very big man at RCA Victor, he said he had never heard anyone play the melody like I played the melody. He said, you play the words of a song. When they say, I love you, you play that way. When the words say, I hate you, why, your tone gets very cold. And I was playing jazz at the time, JoNell, but I suddenly just took his word for it and started playing the melody. In fact, my first recording session, he wheeled in a big cigar store Indian, was about 6 feet tall, and the Indian had his hand up to his head like this, and there was a big sign over his head, and it said, where's the melody? And every time I'd start playing jazz and get off the melody, he'd point to the Indian and say, where's the melody? And my first record, my first single record was Autumn Leaves, and that went over 3 million. And that, of course, was before you were even born.
That really did establish you.
Yeah.
Now, there's a story about a performance you did of Autumn Leaves on, I believe, a television show, and I'm not sure which one, where the audience or someone was supposed to spill over buckets of leaves to be floating around you as you were playing, and they sort of got in the way. Is that a true story? It's
a true story.
Where did that happen?
They actually buried the piano before I was through.
Now, where did that take place?
I think that was on an old Andy Williams show that I was on. But they told me they were going to have a few little leaves float down as I played, but they didn't tell me that they'd gone out and gathered up the whole fall harvest. And they had them just in great big, like, holders up there. And at first, I started playing, a few little leaves came down. I thought, gee, isn't that beautiful? This is going great. And then more and more came down until the whole keyboard was covered, I was covered, and I barely got through the piece.
Was that on live television?
That was on the days of live television. And believe it or not, on that same show, why, Johnny Carson was a guest. And he was under the piano tickling my feet as I was trying to pedal. So I'll never forget that show as long as I live. It was a very traumatic experience, especially since you couldn't cut it over. It was all live.
Right. Now, was that actually your network television debut?
Oh, no. I'd been on a lot of TV shows before then.
But you never know what somebody's going to pull, right?
No, you don't.
Or back in those days.
In those days, it was all very spontaneous. And now, what they do is they show you bloopers. Now you tune in to see all the crazy things that we used to see continually when we did it live.
There's that air of spontaneity, too, that you know you have to keep going, which
Yeah,
lends a more fun atmosphere to a lot of programs, I think.
And I think it lends more reality to it, JoNell, because you go with whatever's going on at the moment rather than trying to remember a bunch of lines that you must do perfectly. And you know if you don't do them perfectly, we can always roll the tape again.
Right. Now, you mentioned that happened on the Andy Williams show, and of course your name is Roger Williams. Did people ever get you confused or think you were brothers or from the same family?
I tell you, I've often wished that I had a name like Liberace. Roger Williams, they get confused with Roger Miller all the time.
Right, and there's also Roger Whittaker.
And Roger Wagner, and Roger Moore, and there's all kinds of Williamses. There's a million Williams around. In fact, Roger Miller lives about 2 blocks from me in Encino, California, and the mailman even gets us mixed up all the time. Of course, I think some of his fan letters are much more interesting than mine, so I read them before I take them over to him.
That's great. Of course, you always remember who you are, don't you?
Most of the time
Most
I
of the
do,
time.
yeah.
Now, you're here in Central Florida. You were here performing at Epcot Center, I understand, with the All-American Orchestra. What kind of experience was that for you?
That's a great thing. You know, these Disney people, they really are innovators. They had a contest, JoNell, where they went to all the states in the Union, and they held over 1,000 auditions among high school musicians. Out of the 1,000, they picked 43 musicians that are the top talents in this country. And these kids just scare you to death. They are really, really great. In fact, my advice to them is, please don't practice. I've got enough competition. These kids are high school, and in a few years they're going to hold down probably the top professional musical jobs in this country. So it's very inspiring for me, and I hope I'm getting across to them because I love to work with kids. I really do. I have a good memory.
What all is it that you were doing with them? Were you conducting classes? Or?
Mm-hmm. And then we play the shows together. In fact, Disney is doing this throughout the summer. They're bringing in people like, well, I guess Richard Carpenter's the next one of the Carpenters, and he'll be working with them, and Tom Scott, the great saxophone player. They're bringing in Johnny Green, who has probably done more Academy Award television shows than anyone in history, and a great composer, too. And this way, the kids get to see the experiences that we have gone through. The thing I've tried to get across to the kids, you know, in the last few years in this country of ours, we have stressed the fact that you've got to be a good sport and it's okay to lose. I feel kind of the opposite of that, JoNell. I think it's important to win. My self-image is the most important thing I have in life. If I like me today, I'm going to like you. If I hate me today, I'm going to hate you, and you're going to wonder why. I think that the way I feel about myself is all important. And the times I've lost in life, I've used those times to really get mad and really try harder to win. And all the real winners that I've met in life are people that have lost many times but never lost sight of that goal of winning, of being on top, of being the very best me that I can be. That's all I want to do in life. I just want to be the best me I can be.
So you're saying it's not only winning, it's wanting to win that's important.
Yeah, it really is. And when you lose that desire to win, I think you start dying, whether you're 20 years old or 80.
I think that's a really important ideal then that you're able to pass along to the kids in the All-American Orchestra, because I know that something like that, an experience like that, through a summer intensive training program could make the difference in them deciding whether or not to go into music as a career. So, I mean, do you feel like maybe you've helped a few decide that that's what they want to do?
I don't know, but they give me a lot of inspiration. I hope it works both ways.
Now, as a pianist, do you find that you are still learning today just as much as you did 20, 30 years ago?
Oh, baby, I learn every day. And as I said, I think every one of us are very unique. And I think every one of us do something better than probably anybody else in the world can do. The trick is to find it. That takes a little doing in life. But once you find it, you give it everything you got, and then I think you can really make a success of your life.
Right. Now, you're one of the lucky people who is doing something that you love to do and also making money at it and being very successful. That's kind of rare. A lot of people are having to work in jobs that they hate just in order to make money to live on. But you're one of the lucky few who's out there doing something you love to do.
Yeah, and I don't ever want to retire. And all the people that I know that are successful and like doing what they do don't want to retire. We just want to keep doing it until we drop. And I love my work. I hate to travel. It's tough traveling nowadays. Just try an airport and see how crowded these planes are. Just getting here to Orlando, I sat 3.5 hours on a runway trying to get out of St. Louis in a raging thunderstorm. And I had just played a concert the night before at the University of Illinois. And I had to get to Orlando to play one the next night. The orchestra was waiting for me here at 1 p.m. And when we finally got off the runway in St. Louis, I arrived here at 5:30. We had less than an hour rehearsal, and I had to play a concert that night. And that's tough. I have two sayings in life that I really go by. One of them is take what you want out of life, but pay for it. If you really want to be a winner and you really want to make it, you got to pay, and you got to pay a big price. I think it's worth it, but I don't get mad at people that don't think it's worth it. That's their choice, and that's their life. But I like to be a winner.
What was your other saying you had? You said you had two, and that was one.
The other saying is just 3 words that I made up, and that is, compared to what? Every time I get a little conceited in life and think I'm a big shot, I say, compared to what? And I can always find somebody that I think is way above me. Every time I get feeling sorry for myself, I say, hey, compared to what? And I look at some guy that, you know, is really having a rough time in life. And it kind of levels me out in life. So I don't get too conceited, I don't get too down. I'm pretty happy just to be who I am and to be able to work and to be able to do what I do best.
Right. Is that sort of feeling, is that why you agreed to do the public service announcements in Los Angeles for the hearing impaired?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. And the other reason, JoNell, is I'm really worried about the kids of this country. I like rock and roll, and I have a tremendous collection of rock. But the kids in this country, a lot of them are going deaf, and they don't even realize it. If you've ever been underwater and seen these little plants that go like this under the water at the bottom of the sea, well, that's how our eardrums are. We have like 200,000 of those little things going around. And excessive sound moseys down, cuts them off. They just drop like dead, and they can never grow back. And once you lose that hearing, you're deaf.
Right. Now, you have produced a public service announcement, as I mentioned, and it is airing in the Los Angeles area, and it features just a little bit of Roger Williams piano playing, and that's why we're going to show it to you right now.
Did you know that the man that wrote that music could not even hear that music? Beethoven eventually went completely deaf. But if he were alive today, he would be able to hear, thanks to the brilliant research being done at the House Ear Institute of Los Angeles. They're working so that all may hear.
About a week and a half ago, President Reagan gave the award for the Outstanding Physician of the Year. It went to 2 doctors this year, Dr. Howard House and Dr. Bill House. These are the men that have developed this hearing aid, cochlear implant it's called. And this is the hearing aid that President Reagan wears.
Right. The one that you can hardly see unless you're right up next to him.
That's right. I guess he got too close to a gun on a set that he was working. He was working a Western movie, and somebody fired a gun right close to his ear, and he lost a lot of hearing in this one ear. So they've helped him tremendously. And as I said, we're kind of worried about the kids because people like Ted Nugent and some of the rock stars are coming in at age 22, 23, and JoNell, they're practically deaf.
There are a number of major stars in the rock and roll world who are having hearing trouble. I think it's Pete Townsend is one.
You're right.
From The Who.
Yeah, Pete's had a lot of trouble. And, you know, it's possible to make good music without just blasting your ears out or actually deafening you. So that's the only thing I have against rock is the volume.
You're talking about like live in concert especially?
Yes, and a lot of the kids now, of course, have got the Walkmans and they turn them up so high that that's hurting very badly too. You see, we're in an age now, when I was a kid, and that's a while ago, why everything was, you whispered, "I love you." Now you gotta shout it or nobody even listens. And everything in television, everything in radio is just pound, pound, pound. And get over that message and say it as fast as you can. Even when you do public service announcements, can you do a little faster rides? And can you talk a little louder? And can you get to the words across? And people have to be more and more stimulated. So, of course, the volume goes up. But we lose our sensitivity there. That's what I like about my playing. I like to play very sensitive. I don't like to just pound all the time.
Right. Well, there is that audience that likes to be overstimulated, but then there's also, you are still enormously popular, and you've been popular for a long time.
Thank you.
And, I guess we can think of you in a certain way as Liberace, but not as flamboyant, you know, and a little easier to swallow, maybe.
Well, listen, another one of my favorite expressions is to each his own. To each his own. Lee is being Lee, and I got to be me. So I couldn't go for all those flashy costumes because they're just not me.
Right. Now, what are some of your other, of course, Autumn Leaves was the one that really made you famous.
Yes.
What are some of your other favorite songs that you are well known for?
Well, we had, after Autumn Leaves, we had a song called Near You, which was also before you were born. We had a song called Till that was over $1 million seller. Then we had a thing called Two Different Worlds. After that, we had a thing called Born Free that went over $1 million. My last hit was The Impossible Dream. I'm making 7 different albums this year. And by golly, I hope I get a hit.
What's your latest album called?
To Amadeus with Love. And that's a salute to the great motion picture. Did you get the chance to see that movie?
You know, I haven't seen it
Well,
yet.
you gotta see it.
I know, I keep telling myself, I have to see Amadeus.
Yeah, it's really very beautifully done. And our album just turned out great for MCA. They're very thrilled with it.
Super.
Yeah.
What do you want to do next?
I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm really very happy doing just what I'm doing.
Now, you mentioned that it was difficult traveling, but
Yes.
don't you go on tour about 9 months of the year?
Yeah. That's taking what you want out of life but paying for it. Because
Right.
I have to go on, I run 5 days a week, and I hate every step of it. I really do. And when I'm on tour, why, I eat very carefully because just drinking water in 30 different cities can be very upsetting, believe me. You have to watch your diet. And if you want to last in this business, then you discipline yourself. But when I get home, I'm an ice creamaholic, and I just have a lot of fun when I get home. But when I'm on the road, I'm very, very disciplined.
Right. So the water is a problem. A lot of us who don't travel around a lot would never think of that.
That's
that,
right.
You know, drinking water in every different city, you know, can be a horrible thing.
It really can, John, and they all have a different mineral content. And,
Do you drink bottled water then?
Well, people like, some people I know even take their water with them. I don't do that. I just drink whatever's around. And I have a pretty good constitution.
You said you're very careful about your diet. Are you a vegetarian, or are you on any particular diet?
No. I just have one way of keeping my weight down. I eat everything, but I don't eat much of it. That's a hard thing when you sit down at the table, to just push away from it. But if you can do that, you can eat about anything. Just eat a few bites or a little bit of each and enjoy it. And then, but that's tough.
Now, you were down here at Epcot working with some very talented high school musicians. What could you say to parents who have young musicians in their family and are wondering whether or not these kids are going to be real professionals?
Well, first of all, I get pretty mad at parents. And I think I'm entitled because I got 3 kids of my own. But I get very upset with parents. First of all, they send their kids to college, and maybe the kid flunks out the first year, or he comes home after 2 years and he says, hey, I don't like what I'm in. And the old man says, hey, what do you mean? I spent all this money to send you to school, and now you're a flop out and everything else. With all the thousands of jobs, millions of jobs, parents expect teenagers to make up their mind at a very tender age what they're going to do and stick with it. I think in life, many times, it's more important to know what you can't do than what you can do. Now, I was always good at music. I was so good that I discounted it. I played 13 different instruments when I was 12 years old. None of them very well. I could play any tune on any instrument. And it always seemed so easy for me that I just thought, well, I really shouldn't do this because I don't have to work that hard at it. I have a bachelor's degree in engineering. And a lot of people are alive because I didn't pursue it. I was a boxer in the Navy. I was a champ. I have very fast hands. I tried a lot of things before I finally decided on music.
So your advice to parents is to back off and let the kids feel out their own talents?
Yeah, I've got two pieces of advice for parents. If your child shows talent at an early age, my first instrument was a harmonica, believe it or not. Get your child a cheap instrument. It doesn't have to be a big piano or an organ or whatever, and see if they really take to it, whether they like it. But more important than that, and believe me, I'm not just plugging Roger Williams, take your kids to see the famous musical talents. Now, you dads, you take your kids to see the basketball games, the football games, you take them to the baseball games, and then you wonder why your kid doesn't want to practice. Kids like to emulate. They like heroes. I remember when I was, JoNell, when I was 11 years old, my parents took me to see Patterson, who was a very, very famous pianist about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I was 11 years old, and at the end of his concert, everybody stood up and started to really applaud and yell, bravo. And I was standing there and I thought, gee, could this be me someday? And all of a sudden, the baseball wasn't that important to me anymore, as it had been when I saw Babe Ruth play once. All of a sudden, I could identify with Patterson. And all I say to you is, take your kids to see these famous artists At the worst, the kids will come home with just an appreciation of music and say, hey, Dad, he was great, you know, now let's go see the Rolling Stones. But at least they'll be exposed, and you'll at least give them idols to go by. And if they do have musical talent, you'll find it's much easier for them to practice after that because they'll have a goal in mind.
Exactly. What about practicing? How much practice do you feel is required if a young person really starts to get dedicated and feels like they really can go somewhere with their musical talent? How much should they practice? Some kids practice too much and some not enough.
Well, my mother was very sneaky. When I'd get home from school, she'd have a big pitcher of milk on the piano and a plate of cookies. And I'd practice till the cookies ran out, and then I'd run out. Because I always did like football and baseball and boxing, and I was into sports. But she kept up my interest because that plate of cookies was always there every night, and it was bribery, but it worked with me. I think that the only real motivation in life is self-motivation. If you're doing a job and you're not motivated, you're just going through the motions, it isn't really making it, and you're not really doing anything for you. But if a kid really likes music, usually they'll motivate themselves at least to a certain degree. I did as soon as I got through the cookie stage, and that was about 7, 8 years old. Then I started practicing an hour just because I like to. But if the kid doesn't like to, fine. Then he'd be a good engineer, he'd be a good doctor, he'd be a good lawyer. But he'll always have that appreciation for music, no matter what field he's in.
Okay. That's a wonderful thought, too. And the kids you've been working with at the All-American Orchestra, you feel like they got some real talent there?
Oh, these guys are winners, every one of them, and they're eager, and they want to do it. And that just fires me up, you know. That really makes me want to go with them. Well,
Roger Williams, you're just an amazing human being. It's been a great interview, and I'm just so glad you came by today and talked with us, and good luck with your piano playing and everything else you're doing.
Well, JoNell, with your looks and my talent, just think what we could do.
Let's go.
Okay.
That's all for today. We're taking off. Bye-bye.